Okay, so welcome to the revision materials for Unit 2, Global Information. Part of the Cambridge Technicals Level 3. You can see it's 90 guided learning hours, and the aim of the unit, according to the exam board, is to demonstrate the use of information in the public domain, globally, in the cloud, across the internet, by individuals and organisations. And the whole purpose of this unit is to provide you with a greater understanding of how organisations and individuals use these information sources, both within and outside of their organisation, the kind of information that they have and use, the data they collect, how they convert it into a usable knowledge, and so on. So if we scroll down, we can see the teaching content is listed for us here. This is worth bearing in mind, first of all, that for externally assessed units, this is a 90-minute exam, where content contains IE, so like here, for example, it may be the case that the exam board will ask you a direct question about these topics. Where the unit content is shown as an e.g. or an example, you won't generally get asked a direct question about that. It's just an example to kind of get your mind thinking in the right direction. So let's have a look first of all at learning objective or learning outcome 1. Understand where information is held globally and how that information is transmitted or shared with people or sent to other people. So 1.1 is about the holders of information. So we know that information exists. We know that people and organizations and businesses and so on, they all have this information and they all use this information. The information they have is not all the same because it depends on the context. The National Health Service isn't going to have the same information as, say, Amazon, because it's not necessary for them to go about their day-to-day business. It's not needed for their particular operations. So holders of information is to do with the categories of those holders, where that information is, and then you may be asked exam questions on the way that that information is used and accessed in different locations across the world, how that might be different because of what's known as the digital divide. So we know that individual citizens like you and me, we are holders of information. We hold information about our finances. We hold information about our appointments. In our smartphones, we have address books. We might have documents that we've created on OneDrive or on Google Drive that we can refer back to later. We may have downloaded PDF files, for example. We might be holding information about other people, about where they live, their email addresses, and so on. Businesses have information that's specific to their business, such as sales, products. They may have information about research and development into new products. Educational institutions, they hold information as well. Information that you can see on the systems that you use, such as your attendance, what classes you're in, your timetable, any comments that have been made about you. Governments have information. They have information that's specific to the state. They have information about their MPs, about the laws, about the things that are going through Parliament, and so on. Charities have information. They have information that helps them to go about their business as a charity. They also have websites which contains information about the charity and how you can give money. In this country, we have the NHS. We have dentists and doctors and hospitals, educational as well as healthcare institutions, and they have information that's specific to our health and well-being and treatment plans and those kinds of things. And then sometimes there are community organisations at a community level, and they have information that's specific to them depending on who they are and what they do. So the whole idea of this is just that different organizations and people and services and institutions and governments, they all have information, so they fall into categories of information holders. Sometimes they're called stakeholders. Location's an issue as well. You may be asked questions on the fact that wherever the information is held, or the business is, or the educational institution or the healthcare service, depending on what country it's in, or whether it's in the country, or whether it's in the city, whether it's in a large town or a small town, whether you're accessing it from home or within the workplace, this is going to have some impact on how fast you can get this information, how secure this information might be, what you can and can't access. So if you're in a developing country and your infrastructure and your broadband is not very good, then it's going to take longer to access this information. It may not be as secure, perhaps, as it is in a fully developed country that's got plenty of money to spend on infrastructure and security and so on. If you live out in the country, you may find your mobile signal's not as good because companies just don't want to invest in infrastructure in areas where they're not likely to get money back from customers. So you might find that if you live out in the country, your mobile signal isn't very good. It might go off completely. If you're in the workplace and you're logged on to the local network in the office, you might find you've got access to everything. But from home, some areas might be cut off from you because of security, or you might have to use a VPN or some other kind of security tunnel that gives you access to this stuff without there being a security risk because you're not in the workplace. So you'll have to have some understanding not only of the categories, but of how the location can affect the access to this information and the sharing of this information, and how the technologies in these areas differ slightly between developed and developing countries, or rural and urban areas, making the information maybe less available, less easy to share, less secure to transmit. So if we look down the exemplification, you'll see what you're expected to know and what you may be asked a question on is any of these categories. You need to know about the different holders of information, what category they fit in, and their location. And this should give you some understanding of what's known as a digital divide, of how living in rural or urban or developed or underdeveloped countries, it affects the access to the technology and the reliability of the technology. So let's have a quick look at an example question that you might find on the exam. So this is from a past paper. And the question we're interested in here is this part 2. So the question says, a retail organization uses data and information. So skipping down to part 2, identify 2 stakeholders of information. Now, part A is asking us what is meant by the public information classification type. We learn about that later. Part 2 is then asking us what stakeholders might have this type of public information. So if we think about this, the question is basically using this term stakeholder as an alternative to category of holder. So what they're saying is a retail organization, that's a shop. That's maybe an e-commerce website, an organization that sells things to make profit, and that's their purpose. So they're retail. Explain what is meant by public information. Well, that's anything that is available for the public to just go and have a look at. So what they want from you from this question is, for a 3 marks, what does it mean that the information is public? And maybe give some examples of what that is. And then the question we're interested in, what are the stakeholders of this public information? So if we look at the mark scheme, we're told up to 3 marks, including an example, information that is classified as public So this is not classified information. This is information that has been classified as public. Information can also be classified as private and so on, and we come to that later on. So we're not talking about classified information, we're talking about the way that information is put into certain classes, and this particular class of information is public. So it's information that can be seen by anyone, that's why it's public. It's in the public domain. It's got nothing in it that is private or sensitive that we're not allowed to look at. And an example could be the address of the shop, the website address, for example. Could be any census records or information on the electoral roll, about the demographics of the customers or something like that, and any other valid suggestion of information that is public. So what are we interested in? Well, who are the stakeholders? So if we think about what we looked at over here, we were thinking about educational institutions, businesses, governments, charities, healthcare services, community organisations. So do any of these fit in the answers to this question? Well, yes. Office of National Statistics, well, that's government. Credit reference agencies, the NHS, that's healthcare. The general public, well, that's just individual citizens like me and you. Government, well, that's specifically listed in the specification. Governments, just here. Okay? Security services, again, could be part of the government. Or any other valid suggestion. So where we have here individual citizens, businesses, governments, healthcare services, this is the same thing. It's just breaking it down a little bit smaller under its kind of umbrella term. So the ONS and the government, the security services, they would all come under that government heading. And the NHS obviously comes under healthcare services. So for 2 marks, you just have to list 2. So if you'd have said healthcare services or government or individual citizens, then you would have picked up 2 marks for that question. Okay, so that's 1.1. It's the holders, it's the location, it's the technologies that may or may not be available in terms of accessing and transmitting this information, and some understanding of the digital divide and how that affects these holders and this transmission of information because of generally the location or because of just lack of infrastructure and lack of money.